Come to order. We will begin the consent agenda, the presentation, proclamations, and resolutions portion of our agenda for Monday, June 19, 2023. The first item we have on the agenda is a presentation titled "A Responsible Community Protects Its Children," and that is by Dana and Becky Hofseth, if I pronounced that correctly. Thank you all for being with us tonight. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry, hang on just a second.
I had asked Chairman Anderson if I could quickly introduce
Oh.
our new dentist, just to introduce.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. I'm sorry. Hold on just a second, folks. I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
So I would like to introduce Dr. Lacey Hudson. And Dr. Hudson, if you want to come up here. Commissioner Anderson was so kind to extend an invitation a while back, and we've waited a long time for a dentist to join us, and she's been with us since April the 10th. And just a little bit about her. She is a compassionate general dentist with 10 years of experience diagnosing and treating dental issues in the public health setting. She comes to us from Knox County Health Department, where she was a general dentist from November of 2015 until coming over with us. And then she also, in her background, was with Hawkins County Health Department. She got her Bachelor of Science from the University of Tennessee and her dental degree from the University of Tennessee Health and Science Center College of Dentistry in Memphis. So I'd like to introduce her, and we're so excited to have her and let her tell you a little bit about herself.
Well, I'm somewhat local. I grew up in Carnes, and so I met my husband. He used to work for KPD, but now he works for TVA as an investigator. We met when we were really young and got married, and I went off to dental school. Now we've got 2 boys, and I still live somewhat local. I'm in Hardin Valley now, so it's a pretty quick commute, but I love serving the community. I love helping people. There's a big need for individuals that don't have dental care or just are scared, and I just like to give them that good experience and be helpful and take care of them when I can. Can't help everybody, but I sure can try. Y'all have any questions for me?
Are you Cody's wife?
Absolutely.
I thought you looked familiar.
Yes, I am.
It's been a long time.
He is a very, I was telling them, I said he is a very social man, and he knows a lot of people, especially in the police community.
He's a heck of a cop.
And he started out in Anderson
Sure did.
County
Started out
working at
working
the
for
jail.
us.
Yep,
Sure did.
he sure did. Yep. So I am.
Good to have you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad to be here. So.
Any questions for Dr. Hudson?
Welcome. Yes. Welcome.
Glad to be here. Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Thanks.
And now we'll turn it over to the Hofseths. Sorry.
Good evening. My name is Becky Hofseth, and my husband Dana and I want to thank you for the opportunity to stand before you tonight. Our role as parents to 7 and grandparents to 11, as well as our love for our community, is what compels us to get involved in one of the great travesties of our time, and that is the failure to protect our children. Back on March 27th, we attended the public forum of the Anderson County Library Board, where we listened to a lively airing of divergent views. I took notes and have since done a great deal of reflection, including the significance of the library in both my childhood and adult life. As a child, books were delicious sweets, and the library was a free candy store. Each summer, my sister and I would ride our bikes to the local library. We'd wander amongst the shelves and get as many books as we could fit in our baskets. The library was a wonderful and safe place. And years later, the library was a crucial resource during 26 years of homeschooling. Our brood was free to wander and find their selections while I gathered off books for the week. And not once did I wonder or was concerned about what they might find until the day I learned our small town Alaska library had no pornography filters on their computers. So with just a glance over a shoulder, a child's innocence could be stolen. Thankfully, the community took seriously its part in protecting children, and safeguards were immediately implemented. Some things never change. Throughout our history, communities have taken seriously their obligation to protect children, including acknowledging their error and remedying accordingly. We saw that in the Child Labor Act of 1938, and today we see it in county budgets, ensuring children have safe playgrounds and even providing the safety net of foster care. When local libraries carry books specifically targeted at children, books which contain explicit sexual and graphic material as well as confusing and false gender identity themes, it demonstrates that the leadership of those communities have lost sight of the obligation to protect their children. Authors and publishers have sunk to new lows, but communities can still say no. Not in our schools, not in our libraries. Our objective tonight is to make the case that these books do in fact present a clear and present danger to children and teens. They are not just unsuitable, they are evidently harmful. Though the list of egregious books is long and growing, I have brought only one to demonstrate, and we actually are going to be having slides to help, just as a visual. But I only brought one, and it's going to give you a good idea of the content as well as the authoritative, albeit beguiling tone. And it begins. This is Ruthie. She's a transgender girl. That means when she was born, everyone thought she was a boy until she grew a little older, old enough to tell everyone that she's actually a girl. This is Ruthie's friend Alex. Alex is both a boy and a girl. When Alex was born, everyone thought Alex was a girl, but Alex is both boy and girl. This is Alex's friend JJ. JJ is neither a boy nor a girl. Alex and JJ are both non-binary. Just like there are many different ways to be a boy or a girl, there are many different ways to be non-binary, too many to fit in a book. See, when you were born, you couldn't tell people who you were or how you felt. They looked at you and made a guess. Maybe they got it right, maybe they got it wrong. When people guess wrong, it's okay to let them know. Ruthie was 5 when she told her parents, I know you think I'm a boy, but really I feel like a girl. Oops, Ruthie was a girl all along. They just didn't know it at first. Xavier was 3.5 when he told his family. Your feelings about your gender are real. Listen to your heart. It feels good to be yourself, doesn't it? I trust that this reading of this book has stirred up consternation within you, because residing with each of us is a true north, an inner sense of right and wrong. Each of us knows deep down that the content of this book is blatantly untrue. There is no such thing as non-binary. It is a modern-day construct, a demonstration of foolish God defiance. The early McGuffey readers and Mr. Rogers had it right. There are only boys and girls, males and females. There are no other categories, and they can't be changed. No child is born in the wrong body, and to say otherwise is to join the small crowd extolling the emperor's new clothes. As the folktale goes, the townsfolk uncomfortably go along with a pretense, not wanting to appear, in today's vernacular, non-PC, non-woke, or intolerant. Even when a child blurts out that the emperor is wearing no clothes, the emperor continues the farcical procession, walking more proudly than ever. Today we call this groupthink, the practice of a group's reasoning characterized by uncritical acceptance and unquestioning conformity to prevailing points of view. Groupthink has the power to make a group of people deny the obvious. We are currently living in a groupthink hell where pride is an entirely apt name for a movement that is unashamedly defies God's natural laws of creation, and where sexual perversion is proudly paraded before young children. Forgive the graphic photos. They are on the screen to make the point as to the extent of the depravity allowed in our streets and in our libraries across the land. In a time not long ago, parents would never have allowed their children to be around this. How weak-spined we are if we idly stand by and allow this destruction of children's innocence. How darkened our thinking if we consider ourselves enlightened as we applaud and protect the thieves of innocence. You will be given an article with that title, which we sincerely hope that you will read and pass along to Joshua Anderson and the other commissioners that are not here. As you may recall, when gay pride started, conservatives were pretty quiet, allowing that consenting adults have the right to make their own choices. But it did not stop there, and now a line has been drawn. Leave the children out of it. Thankfully, there is a growing number, even within the gay community, who are activated in agreement. Gays Against Groomers, they say. The annual June celebration of legal same-sex marriage has morphed into a raunchy display of overt sexuality and debauchery in our name, and we find ourselves incredibly disturbed by the inclusion of children. Our community has gone too far. Not only do we find pride unnecessary now, we are concerned by the exposure of inherently sexual materials that fall under the LGBT umbrella to children. In reality, we are looking at the destruction of innocence right before our eyes, and we won't be silent about it. Children are being indoctrinated, sexualized, and even medicalized. Teaching children to explore their sexuality and gender identity is outwardly targeting and grooming children. We are here to stand against it and hold the line and our community accountable. Commissioners, we are talking about precious little souls who simply do not have the capacity to discern or protect themselves. If any of you are parents or have been involved in the care of young children, then you know firsthand there are 4 things to be true. Children are impressionable. No wonder they're likened to wet cement. Experts agree their brains are still developing and they are still learning how to think critically. They are likely to believe what they are told and to imitate the behavior of those around them. Children are fickle. They do not know their own minds and can change them faster than a hiccup. For example, first child has a stick, they love that stick. They put it down, his brother picks it up. A tussle ensues, mother finds another stick to assuage brother. First child now wants nothing more to do with the first stick, but must have the new stick. We have all seen this play out on repeat. Children are vulnerable. Wise parents talk about stranger danger because children are naturally trusting. We teach them never accept sweets from a stranger, but crucially, we want them to understand that any person can be dangerous, and even if they look and act nice. And likewise, children are also vulnerable to harmful books, even when they look and sound nice. By nature, children are foolish. They do not know what is best for them. They will choose sweets over vegetables, staying up over going to bed, and will run headlong into danger if a wise adult is not close by, whether it's touching a hot stove or proclaiming a new gender identity. It is sobering to realize there is no diagnostic tool for gender dysphoria. Children self-diagnose, and therapists are trained to affirm them. This from a licensed clinical social worker. Yesterday, I sat through 2 therapy trainings that instructed me to immediately affirm kids as young as 3. Because kids know themselves and we need to let them lead. There was no room for questions or discussions about cases like these. When it comes to protecting our children, plain old common sense is needed more today than ever. Perhaps we should hear from Andy Griffith here.
Why not let him decide? No, I'm afraid it don't work that way. You can't let a young'un decide for himself. He'll grab at the first flashy thing with shiny ribbons on it. Then when he finds out there's a hook in it, it's too late. Wrong ideas come packaged with so much glitter, it's hard to convince them that other things might be better in the long run. All a parent can do is say, wait, trust me, and try to keep temptation away.
Sorry, the video wasn't running, but you got the idea on that one. The story of Pandora's box is a metaphor for the inestimable significance of a single decision that results in endless trouble and misery. The story serves as a reminder that there are indeed dire consequences to particular actions, and there are some things that are best left untouched. To our point tonight, sexualizing the minds and hearts of impressionable children. The normalization of the sexualization of children and teens is the Pandora's box of our time, the root of all sorts of evils, with children the primary victims. And to share just a few, we are now seeing the safety of children compromised, with a growing number of sexual assaults in girls' bathrooms thanks to the validation of you identify as a girl, then you are. Children are coming home from school confused and distressed by blatant promotion of transgender indoctrination. Imagine learning your child without your consent was introduced to the genderbread person who helped them self-select their gender identity, expression, and what gender they're physically and emotionally attracted to. In Washington state, parents can lose their children if they do not affirm their child's gender confusion. In Australia, parents can be fined $10,000 or go to prison for 10 years. Unthinkable? Yes, but it is happening. Slippery slopes are real, and we would be fools to think it cannot happen in Tennessee. By far, the most egregious consequence of not protecting our children is a life-altering, irreversible damage from puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and mutilating surgeries, all done with zero long-term safety studies. What we do know is that supposed gender-affirming care is not relieving underlying issues of gender dysphoria. Despite trans activist claims, the number of suicides do not decrease. Persons with transsexualism after sex reassignment had considerably higher risks for mortality, suicidal behavior, and psychiatric morbidity than the general population. Detransitioners are coming forward to share their stories of how they have been grievously and permanently harmed.
In the past 4 or 5 months, I have watched as my body has fallen apart in front of me, my joints constantly hurting, my vocal cords aching, watching as parts of me atrophy away before my very eyes. How can you look me in the eyes and tell me that a child can consent to being changed to an experimental medical industry?
Chloe Cole, pictured here on the next slide, struggled to fit in. Ultimately, her search to find identity led her to transition at age 12, get testosterone at age 13, have a double mastectomy at age 15, and ultimately detransition at age 16. And now at 18 years old, she's on a mission to protect children from the trauma she endured at the hands of the medical establishment, who never addressed the roots of her pain and irreversibly damaged her. In response to the question, is it traumatizing to think about? Chloe responds, it's horrifying. This shouldn't have been an option for me. It hurts knowing I could have just grown up without any intervention, and I could have been completely normal. I wouldn't be dealing with all the stuff that I am now. I'm having some pretty serious complications from my surgery on top of all the trauma that it's caused me. If somebody just told me, like, this isn't going to make you into a boy, and there's no guarantee that doing any of this is going to resolve your distress. You're perfect as you are as a woman. The issue isn't your body, it's the way that you think of it. And no matter what you do to yourself, what drugs you take, what surgeries you get, you're always going to be a woman, and you are enough. I wouldn't be dealing with any of this right now. These tragic stories don't detail the barbarism of these irreversible surgeries. Most of us know healthy breasts are being cut off, but you may be shocked to learn, as I was, about the mutilating procedure called phalloplasty, where muscle and flesh from the forearm or inner thigh is removed to construct a forever flaccid, sausage-like appendage. Those who undergo this wrought with risk procedure will never be whole again, including the ability to reproduce. And those who affirm the fantasy of changing genders are active participants in putting vulnerable children on this grotesque path. And frankly, it would be better for them to be thrown into the sea with a millstone around their neck. Transgenderism is a social contagion. Case in point, the Gender Identity Development Service in London notes a significant and sharp rise over the past 10 years in the number of referrals, from 250 to 5,000. There has also been a dramatic change in the case mix from predominantly male to predominantly female. Just as with anorexia, bulimia, and cutting, social contagions capture imagination and influence behavior. The difference with this current social contagion is one, there is a huge profit for the medical and pharmaceutical industries, and two, the spreaders are social deconstructionists, wearing the influential hats of author, publisher, teacher, professor, parent, politician, doctor, therapist, and at hand, complicit librarian, county, school, and library board members. So, what is a responsible community to do in the face of all this? Well, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Ridding our libraries of child-targeted, sexually aberrant books is one bite, but it's a big bite because these books are like cancer cells metastasizing in little minds. They are like a gateway drug that begins with gender confusion and turns into full-blown self-hate and self-injury. Having these kinds of books available to our children is beyond the pale and absolutely unworthy of a body of decision makers who have been charged with protecting our children. It behooves us to see things as they really are, to be critical thinkers and non-conformers in a groupthink culture. We must be the ones to cry out, the emperor has no clothes. We must stop pretending these books are harmless and justifying any benefit. Rather than caving to a proactive, loud minority, we must buck up and initiate action to keep these books off the shelves, out of the hands of children, and make our libraries once again a safe and wonderful place. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my husband.
Transgender indoctrination of our younger children is the first but not the only concern. There are also so-called sexual education books for teens and preteens that encourage both sexual experimentation and gender identity exploration. The highly explicit content promotes promiscuity and high-risk sexual behaviors as a healthy and normal part of growing up. These books do, in fact, run counter to the spirit of Tennessee law, which states that sex education must emphasize abstinence. Honestly, it was hard to know how to proceed here. Should I read excerpts to prove the case, providing you with actual evidence of explicit and perverse material in minor targeted books? For the sake of decorum, I suspect I would be quickly interrupted. This exact scenario has played out before various boards across the country. The irony is, of course, the concerned parents are being asked to stop reading and showing books' graphic pages while children can check them out of the library tomorrow. To spare us all the indecency, I would ask that you do your own deep and, warning alert, very dark dive into these books. A resource packet was given to the chairman that lists and describes some of the books in question along with excerpts and illustrations. Going back to the premise that communities bear a responsibility to protect children, let us consider some of the dangers of exposing youth to these explicit sexual materials. The earlier one is exposed to pornography, the higher the likelihood of continuing. And like other addictions, as we all know very well, pornography is progressive. The more adolescents view pornography, the poorer their grades are. Low academic performance is linked to poor social skills and aggressive behavior. This aggressive behavior often includes sexual violence against women. Pornography exposure leads to decreased self-esteem and symptoms of anxiety and depression in teenage girls particularly. There are few things more dishonorable than misleading the young. Lord forbid we participate or contribute in any way to children being encouraged and even pushed towards the dark addiction of pornography, as these books are presented as healthy, age-appropriate, and educational. We need to see it for what it is, an evil attempt to dismantle moral boundaries and to destroy the innocence of youth. We are at a watershed moment in our culture regarding these issues, a Churchill-Chamberlain moment. Chamberlain either did not see the danger clearly or out of fear sought to appease the darkness. Churchill saw the real danger and knew the only way forward was to confront it head on. No appeasement. To be a Chamberlain, you can see, my good friends, for a second time in history, a British Prime Minister has returned from Germany bringing peace with honor. I believe it's peace for our time. Go home and get a nice sleep. Or to be a Churchill, appeasement is feeding the crocodile, hoping he will eat you last. The difficult truth for appeasers is that their children, grandchildren, and generations to come will end up paying the price for their refusal to protect them. You each have the privilege and opportunity to set things right in Anderson County. In doing so, you align with the will of the people, well demonstrated by the elected Tennessee legislators who are overwhelmingly successful in passing laws to protect the mental and sexual health of children, specifically the restriction of minors from drag queen shows and making chemical and surgical castration of minors illegal. Thank God for the courage of those state representatives who carried out their duty to protect children, disassociating themselves from the aberrant sexual ideology being foisted on our children. In what feels like a tsunami, next-level sexual revolution, it is understandable that some of us have been set back on our heels and unprepared to decipher the significance and repercussions of all of this. It takes humility and courage to pivot, but once we know better, hopefully we do better. We respect that standing up against a loud minority is no easy thing. We also know that you can't please everyone. So when the organized, loud minority show up strongly to falsely claim that a removal of these books is oppression, hateful, intolerant, dangerous, or whatever other excuse they come up with, remember this: under the guise of diversity, equity, and inclusion, irrespective of the harm caused, their goal is to assure that children have access to the type of books that are unprecedented in American history. Books that are purposely exposing children to graphic and aberrant sexual content, normalizing the sexualization of children, and presenting blatant untruth as truth. In other words, as Dr. Carol Swain says, diversity, equity, and inclusion has morphed into perversity, insanity, and delusion. As for their book banning argument, we know better. Reasonable citizens can agree that if there are books that are clearly harmful, they do not belong in our libraries. The loud minority needs to be honest with their outrage. They are still free to sexualize their own children. Amazon Books is waiting to take their order. As for the suggestion, just leave it to the librarians. They know best. It is important to understand that the ALA does not represent the majority of Tennesseans. The American Library Association has long been captured by the left. It postures as a champion of free speech rights, but in fact twists the ideas of censorship and free speech to meet the ideological requirements of left-wing activism. If nothing else, over the past several years, we have learned that trusting the designated authorities without understanding their underlying philosophy is at best unwise. As for the argument that a good library will have something that offends everyone, let us be clear. We are not talking about offensive books. We are talking about books that are essentially mind-raping. Lord forbid that Eric Hoffer's assessment is true of any of us in this room when he writes, "We have rudiments of reverence for the human body, but we consider as nothing the rape of the human mind." Wide-eyed leaders will fulfill their responsibility to protect young minds. They will see the harm, that nothing good will come from this. They will see the lie that purports that this is good for individuals or for a society as a whole. As Solzhenitsyn reminds us, the simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. Courageous individuals will also not allow themselves to be dissuaded or bullied. They make no appeasement, including weak compromises like putting these books on the back shelves of libraries. Budgets, zoning laws, they're all negotiable. But a community's responsibility to protect their children is entirely not negotiable. In a time where silence is no longer golden, we finish with the strongest encouragement to be the courageous voice of reason. You're not a prude, an extremist, a bigot, a transphobe, or homophobe if you think sexually explicit and gender dysphoric books should not be available to children. You're just a good person who clearly sees the naked truth. As in every period where evil seems to be taking the upper hand, these words remain true. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. We pray that God will give the courage to do something, to take a big bite out of the elephant, by bringing policies and libraries back in line.
Excuse me, Mr. Hofseth, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you, sir. Can you give me an idea about how much longer you may have?
One sentence.
Okay, I'm sorry. We usually only allot 30 minutes for this portion of the agenda.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry, yes. We will to take a big bite out of the elephant by bringing the policies and libraries back into line with the will of the people to whom you are responsible, and most importantly, the will of a holy God. In the end, it is He we will all answer to. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from commissioners for the Hofseths? If not, there is nothing else to come for on the consent agenda. We will recess until the regular agenda for 6:30.